Yeah, it's really small.
Hi, and welcome to day 7, 8, and 9, our final 3 days in Israel. So in our final 3 days, we covered a lot of ground. Literally.
We did. A lot of stuff.
So the first of the 3 days we're going to talk about is Sunday, and that is a normal, it's like Monday in Israel.
Right.
So we started out the day heading for the Temple Mount. And Alam dropped us off at the Maghrabi gate, which was the only gate that we were allowed to enter to go on to Temple Mount. And we headed in through security. And it's very tight. So plan on some time getting onto the Temple Mount because you have security to go through.
Our guide Mo explained the history of the Temple Mount as we walked past the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And that area can get very crowded at times. It wasn't when we were there, it was almost empty, but you should check before you go to find out if it's expected to be crowded or not.
The Temple Mount is a very large area and consists of 4 sides. The Golden Gate is on the western side of the Temple Mount and is widely believed to be the gate through which Jesus entered the city riding on a donkey's colt at his triumphal entry just before his crucifixion. It is also the gate through which he will enter at his second coming. It's been sealed since medieval times. For more on the history of the Golden Gate, see the links in the description below.
The teaching steps on the southern wall of the Temple Mount are believed to have been the steps where Jesus, as a 12-year-old boy, taught the elders. Remember that Mary and Joseph found him there after searching for 3 days. When asked where he had been, he told his mother he had been about his father's business. Later, he would stand there and teach during his ministry when he was in Jerusalem.
The highlight of this day for us was the Western or Wailing Wall. By the way, the term Wailing Wall is actually a derogatory term to the Jews. Therefore, Western Wall is a more appropriate name. This structure is part of a huge retaining wall built by Herod the Great around the temple complex, and is the only place on the Temple Mount area where Jews are allowed to pray and worship. If you would like to know more about the history and archaeology of the wall, I have put links in the description. For us, however, it was the feeling there that was most memorable. The 187-foot portion of the wall used for worship is divided into 2 sections, one side for men and the other for women. Chairs are available for anyone to come in and sit. Non-Jews are allowed to put a scrap of paper in the crevices with the names of loved ones that are in need of divine help and prayers. There is a feeling of intense spirituality there. It is quiet and reverent. There is no wailing there, but we observed women in sincere prayer and even encountered one woman who told a member of our group she was from Ukraine and had suffered unspeakable loss. She found comfort there at the wall, and so did we.
Following our tour of the Temple Mount, the group split up for a time as some went through Hezekiah's tunnel and some went to the ruins of the city of David, or the original site for what would become Jerusalem. It is thought to have been the place where King David conquered the Jebusites around 1000 BC. So even though I didn't go to Hezekiah's tunnel, I did walk down the steep hill in the city of David that goes towards the entrance of Hezekiah's tunnel. And there were some ruins from the first temple period, which would have been about 1000 BC to about 500 BC. You can see the terraces that were built to create flat land for growing crops. They have found a 2-story home also built on the hillside. Sherds of pottery lead archaeologists to believe it belonged to a man named Ahiel and his family. It was a typical floor plan with 3 rooms off of a 4th larger room. A stone toilet seat was found outside the home, attesting to the high standard of living of the family. There's also a model of what the home probably looked like. Further up the hill, where it is not so steep, the remains of a large structure have been found, which also dates from the First Temple period. Some have suggested this might be the palace of King David, but so far the excavations have not been able to identify exactly what the structure was or how it was used. The excavations are ongoing. Our final stop of the day was at the Orson Hyde Memorial Garden. It is located immediately next to the Garden of Gethsemane. There are lovely, peaceful views of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, Dome of the Rock, and the Golden Gate. It has a beautiful walking path. The garden commemorates the visit to Jerusalem in 1841 by Orson Hyde, an apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where he offered a prayer dedicating the land for the gathering of the Jews. Monday started early with a trip to Yad Vashem, or the Holocaust Museum. Yad Vashem in Hebrew means a memorial and a name. It is the official memorial for all the victims of the Holocaust perpetrated upon the Jews between 1941 and 1945. There is no photography allowed inside the museum, but there are links in the description to their website where you can view much of what is displayed there.
The room that was most meaningful to us was the Hall of Names. Here's a description of the room and what is housed there. Quote, "The Hall of Names is a memorial to the 6 million Jews that were murdered in the Holocaust. The main hall is composed of 2 cones, one 10 meters high, with a reciprocal well-like cone excavated into the underground rock, its base filled with water. On the upper cone is a display featuring 600 photographs of Holocaust victims and fragments of pages of testimony. These are reflected in the water at the bottom of the lower cone, commemorating those victims whose names remain unknown. Surrounding the platform is the circular repository housing the approximately 2.2 million pages of testimony collected to date, with empty spaces for those yet to be submitted." End quote. The feeling in this room is difficult to describe. It was spiritual in its intensity and most unforgettable. We were permitted to photograph the outside grounds as well as the Children's Memorial. The interior of the Children's Memorial is completely mirrored and reflects the light of only 5 candles. As you walk through, a voice recites the names, ages, and places of origin of all the children that were killed by the Nazis.
6 years old, Russia. Rivka Weinstein, 8 years old, Ukraine. Nikita Rabkin, Synesthesia, Belarus.
It takes 3 months to recite all the names of the 1.5 million children and young people that were murdered.
Following our tour of the Holocaust Museum, we headed back through the streets and past crazy traffic to meet up with our bus and head to Bethany, the traditional home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus.
Bethany was a lovely surprise. This spot was a little jewel. Now, it does have a large church, but it also has a small, more rustic chapel that was very peaceful, and the gardens surrounding it are really lovely. We paused in the small chapel for our educators to talk about the miracle of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, and then whoever in the group wanted to go down into what is thought to have been Lazarus's tomb could go. Now, they tell you beforehand that it's not a good place if you're claustrophobic. So I took them at their word and stayed on the surface. Derek, however, did go down.
Lazarus' tomb is very small, and about 6, maybe 8 people can go in at a time. You go down very narrow stairs to a small room where there is an opening in the floor with a few more steps into the tomb itself. The shelf is where the body of Lazarus would have been laid.
Oh, and this is it? This is the tomb in a chamber. Okay.
Yeah, it's really small.
That's very, you're humble.
Our final morning in Jerusalem was to have been at the Shrine of the Book Museum. Now remember, I mentioned this museum in connection with Qumran, the site of the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is the museum that houses the scrolls. Our tour director had worked diligently to arrange for a tour there and even called the day before, making sure they would be open. They assured him they would be, and then they weren't. Instead of the promised 10 a.m. opening, they didn't open up until 4 p.m. and we had to be on a plane by then, so we missed going there. So the lesson here is check the times and plan to go early in your trip in case they close unexpectedly.
So instead of the Shrine of the Book, we headed to the one quarter of Jerusalem where we were allowed that we hadn't actually been to yet, the Jewish quarter. To get there, we had to walk past the remains of Jerusalem's ancient main street. Known as Cardo Maximus, it was begun by Hadrian and finished by Justinian in the 6th century.
These are original Roman stones. Ooh. Or stones from the street. Yeah, from the street. Very cool. And mosaics. Oh, that's a cool mosaic too. Huh. Obviously this has been restored, but it's very cool.
In its day, it would have been a bustle of activity, as there were shops, street artists, markets all along the way.
Another attraction in the Jewish quarter is the giant menorah. This magnificent menorah was made by the Temple Institute a few years ago, and it is intended to be placed in the third temple when it is finally rebuilt. You can read more about the menorah and the work of the Temple Institute by clicking on the links in the description. When we finally reached the shopping area in the Jewish quarter, we found shops full of art and textiles and so much more. This stop proved to be very fun and one that we wished we'd had more time in.
After a fun and educational morning, it was time to head back to the bus and get to the airport in Tel Aviv for our flight to Cairo. We got there 3 hours early, and it was a good thing. It took the entire 3 hours to get through check-in, security, and finally get to the gate. So if you find yourselves needing to fly out of Tel Aviv, allow a lot of extra time. So we arrived in Cairo later that evening, and then we had a long bus ride from the airport to Giza, where the Egypt part of our trip would begin.
But that's another adventure. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss a thing.
If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and ring the bell to get notified.
You bet. And until next time, Restless friends, you take care.
Bye.